A lot of single men will never be able to attract a good lady. Not because they are not man enough, but because they are focused on developing the wrong things. The cars, the money, the body. And look, those things aren't bad. But without that core inner work, you only attract the wrong kind of attention. Because the kind of lady you actually want is attracted to something most men never develop. And it all starts with having these 5 awkward conversations. Not with her, but with yourself. Now, before we get into them, I want to make something clear. The goal of these conversations isn't to have the perfect answer. It's to have an honest one. Because when she eventually asks you these questions, because she will ask you, your answer shouldn't be what you think she wants to hear. It should be the truth. Even if the truth means she walks away. And just so you know, I haven't fully figured out all of this, but I'll rather start the conversation now than discover the answers too late. Anyways, the first conversation is about sexual purity. And I want to be clear about what this conversation actually is. It's not just asking if you are a virgin. That's too surface level. This conversation goes deeper. It's about your actual beliefs, your triggers, your past, and how honestly you've dealt with it. Most men avoid this conversation with themselves because of shame. There's a gap between who they want to be and where they actually are. And it's easier to pretend to be pure than to be honest about the struggle. I'll be honest, I've asked questions like, how far is too far? Or is kissing allowed? And if you've asked similar questions, let me know in the comments. And here's what I've realized. The fact that you're asking how far can you go means you're trying to get as close as possible to the line without crossing it. And that's not purity. That's negotiating with temptation. I remember spending a good amount of time looking for someone to justify kissing for me. Most people, of course, didn't give me a straight answer. And I think I know why. Because the honest answer depends on you. For some, it's fine. For others, it's the first step towards committing sexual sin. And only you know which one you are. That's why this conversation has to happen with yourself first, because nobody else can answer it for you. Only you know your triggers. Only you know where things tend to go. And if you know it leads you to commit sexual sin, well, that's your answer. In the Bible, Joseph was working in Potiphar's house, and one day Potiphar's wife tried to sleep with him. He didn't stand there and try to negotiate. He was not like, oh, please, no, don't do this, please, don't do this. He didn't even try to see how close he could get. He ran for his life. Joseph knew his triggers well enough to flee before the situation got worse. That's the standard. So the questions to ask yourself are, what does my sexual history actually look like? For example, are you or were you sexually active? Or do you or did you struggle with pornography? What are my genuine triggers? What are my real beliefs around physical boundaries? And have I dealt honestly with my past? The second conversation is about expectations. Specifically, what you expect from her and what you expect from yourself as well. Because here's the thing most men miss. You can't ask for something you're not willing to compliment. For example, I personally don't know how to cook, and for some reason I like food, and I would really like to be with someone who can cook. And I think that's okay, as long as I know what I bring to the partnership that works alongside what I'm asking for. The problem is, most men have never seriously thought this through. They have vague expectations shaped by what they grew up watching, whether it's movies, culture, or maybe what was modeled at home. And those expectations are never really examined until they're already in a relationship and reality doesn't match the picture they have in their head. But here's how I like to think about it. God has trusted me with his daughter. She has a purpose and a calling on her life. My role is to serve and make sure she fulfills that. That's a completely different posture than entering a relationship thinking about what I will get. And the goal isn't just to find someone who will serve you well. It's to become someone who serves well and attract someone with that same posture. Two people both asking, how can I serve you? That's the vision. Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave up himself for her. That's the standard. Sacrificial servant leadership. Not dominance, not passivity. So the questions to ask yourself are my expectations mine, or did they come from what I grew up watching? And am I becoming the kind of man who would attract a woman with the heart of a servant? The third conversation is about money. And this one is awkward because most people would rather talk about almost anything else. There's more shame and pride wrapped up in money than almost any other topic. But money differences are one of the top causes of divorce. And most couples discover they were never on the same page only after they're already deep into a relationship. So this conversation with yourself isn't just about how much you have. It's about your actual relationship with money, your spending habits, your saving habits, your debts, and whether you are managing it or continuing the behavior that created it in the first place. There's also something called your money personality. Are you a spender? You live for now and struggle to save. A saver, focused on security, sometimes a little too rigid. An avoider, you don't look at your accounts and avoid money conversations. Or a money monk, you feel guilty about having money. Knowing which one you are is genuinely useful self-knowledge before a relationship, because your money personality will show up whether you acknowledge it or not. And here's the thing most young guys miss. Most of us were never taught how money actually works. Budgeting, investing, managing debt. You can't have an honest conversation about money if you don't understand it for yourself. Part of this conversation is identifying the gaps in what you know and committing to filling them before you are responsible for more than just yourself. Luke 16 verse 10 says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." How you handle money now is a preview of how you will handle family finances later. So the questions to ask yourself are, what is my money personality? Do I have debt? And am I managing it? Or am I still doing what created it? What gaps do I have in my financial knowledge? And could I honestly support a family with my current money habits? The fourth conversation is about children and marriage. And this one is genuinely awkward because it feels too serious too soon. Most men think they have time to figure this out. But getting into a relationship with someone who has completely different beliefs about these things and discovering it too late is one of the most painful experiences there is. So this conversation with yourself starts with marriage. Not just do you want to get married, but why do you want to get married? And what does marriage actually mean to you? Because here's something most people never think about. Is your view of marriage a covenant or a contract? A contract says, I'll stay as long as this works for me. A covenant says, I'm committed regardless of how hard it gets. Those are completely different things. And knowing which one you are bringing changes everything about how you approach a relationship. Then on children, it's not just how many you want. The deeper questions are, what kind of father do you actually want to be? How do you want to raise them spiritually? What values do you want to pass on to them? How will you discipline? And does that align with scripture? And here's one most people never think about. What if you can't have biological children? Have you honestly thought about that? Are you open to adoption? Most couples assume they're on the same page about children and marriage without ever actually confirming it. My bro, don't be that guy. Psalm 127 verse 3 says, "Children are a gift from the Lord. How you view and raise them reflects how seriously you take what God has given you." The fifth and most important conversation is about your faith. And I say most important because this is the foundation that everything else is built on. Your sexual purity, your expectations, your money, your family, all of it is shaped by the state of your relationship with God. Now, this conversation isn't asking whether you're a Christian or not. That question is too easy to answer dishonestly. The real question is, what does your faith actually look like on a random Tuesday? Not Sunday. Tuesday, when nobody is watching, when there's no one to perform for. Most men who grew up in church have never seriously asked themselves whether their faith is genuinely theirs or whether it was passed down to them without ever choosing it for themselves. That's a different thing entirely. And here's something I want you to be honest about. Are you pursuing God because you genuinely love Him? Or are you pursuing Him because you want a godly woman? Because if your faith is conditional on what you can get from it, that's not faith. That's strategy. And here's how you actually know if your faith is real. It shows up in everything. How you spend your time, how you spend your money, how you treat people, what you do when no one is watching. Would someone who watched your life for a week know you were a Christian without you telling them? Galatians 5 verse 22 to 23 talks about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These aren't things you perform. They are things that grow in a man who is genuinely walking with God. And as a man, you are called to lead your home spiritually. You can't lead your family somewhere you're not going yourself. Matthew 7 verse 24 to 27 talks about the wise man who built his house on the rock. When the storm came, and the storm will always come, his house stood because the foundation was solid. This conversation is about making sure your foundation is solid, not performed, not passed down, not conditional. So the questions to ask yourself are, what does my relationship with God look like on an ordinary day? Is my faith genuinely mine, or was it just passed down to me? Am I pursuing God because I love Him or because I want the benefits? Do the fruit of the Spirit show up in how I actually live? And if you've never been in a relationship before, I recommend you check out this video. Remember, the path is yours to walk. And as always, I'm in your corner, rooting for you.